could you join us and we will start the meeting. I will open us with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te iru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakora, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei hui, and please let me or Letitia know if you need to leave the meeting. We are planning to have morning tea about 10:30. We only have 3 items on the agenda. It shouldn't be a long meeting today. A nice kind of gentle easing in after our recess to this committee. We will start with the apologies, and we do have an apology for partial absence from the Mayor. And are there any other apologies? There appear to be none. So I will move those apologies, and Councillor Free will second. Thank you. Looking for my remote.
I haven't seen you for a long time.
Councillor oh yes, you've no voted. Thank you. All right, those are carried. Would anybody like to declare any conflict of interest? No, appear to be none. So we will move on to the minutes, and we will approve the minutes of our meeting from 26th of June 2024. I will move that, and the Deputy Mayor will second. Pauiwi, Liz, you voted online? Thank you. That is carried. There are no items not on the agenda, and there have been no requests for public participation. And just want to reorder the agenda in accordance with Standing Order 19.1 to accommodate the extra item, the late paper on the LG&Z remits as follows. And then we move on to our first item of general business, which is the Te Toi Mahana Quarterly Performance Report. Siobhan Proctor to introduce the report right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm delighted to present and introduce this report, which is Te Toi Mahana's annual report, which also encompasses the Q4 performance report. Amazingly, Te Toi Mahana has been in operation now for over a year, which is incredible. And I'm very proud of the work that our council staff has done with Te Toi Mahana staff in what has been a pretty seamless transition for the tenants. And I think there's some really good news in this report. Whilst I know many of you will also be interested in the housing upgrade programme, this does relate to the operations of social housing, not the HUP 2 programme. We are intending to bring a business case to you around October on that, and there will be briefings leading up to that as well. So I'd ask for you to take the report as read, welcoming Daniel Tai, who's the Acting Chief Executive at Te Toi Mahana, Louise Marsden, who is the board member of Te Toi Mahana, and also Paul Davis, who is our Relationship Manager for Te Toi Mahana.
Yes, so are there any remarks that you would like to make down that end of the table? Welcome, friends. And if not, we will go to questions.
We're comfortable presenting a bit of an overview, if that's helpful. It feels like an appropriate juncture to do so, bearing in mind this incorporates the annual report, and as we're a year into operations, we thought we'd give a bit of a flavour of kind of where we're sitting. Don't want to dive into the detail. The detail is prescribed by a series of agreements between the council and Te Toi Mahana manner, but we thought it was an appropriate juncture to just step through where we're sitting, if that's okay with you, Rebecca. Thank you. Okay, so key milestones from our perspective, as Siobhan said, we achieved registration with Community Housing Regulatory Authority in July last year, and so we commenced operations formally in 1st of August. It's been a seamless transition for staff, but also for tenants, which is really notable. We started placing IRRS tenants in September last year, and by the end of the financial year reached 111 tenants. We undertook our first rent review in 2 years. That was processed in November 2023, again with no particular issues there. And really significantly in terms of that transition, the service centre and the contact centre was established and went live on the 1st of July. So it's been a big year. It's been a lot of change. And whilst there's been a lot of change at the kind of administrative and processing level, the key thing is to make sure that that our tenants see that as being as seamless as possible. So hand over to Dan to talk through a few of those tenancy focused issues.
Thanks, Louise. Morena tātou. Just a quick update on the tenant wellbeing front. We conducted our first tenant satisfaction survey in June this year, and I was really pleased to see we've got a higher response rate than previous years. Overall satisfaction has gone up from 76% to 77%, despite all the changes and the transition that happened during that year. Majority of our tenants, say the housing actually contribute positively to their well-being, which is something that we're really pleased to see. And we've also completed our inspection program for all of our properties that was stopped because of the COVID lockdown. So we resumed the inspection program, and the team worked through that very effectively. We've got very high occupancy rate and low turnover rate, which suggests that people are generally happy staying with Te Toi Mahana. And we've got also exploring our options around tenant support fund as well that was allocated as part of the transition by the council. We're working with tenant representatives. We've got a workshop with the board scheduled. We also need to monitor quite closely all the government policy changes in the space as well. So that's on the tenant wellbeing front. In terms of community development, it's really pleased to report that we have a very vibrant community, and we've got activities, events, new initiatives starting across the portfolio. We recently had a Matariki celebration. There's a huge turnout, nice weather that sort of helped as well. We've got a Marakai and Marakai hub in Pukehinau. It's down the bottom of Brooklyn Hills, and it's the feedback from the tenant community there is their well-being has improved as a result. We also held Health Gala Day at Newtown for the first time, where we're trying to bring all the support services to our tenants, and that was well received, and huge turnout for that day as well. We're working with WCC, especially with the Connected Community team and the Climate Change team to fund the new CAI initiatives as well. So that's coming, and we're also doing some youth engagement and co-design of the space at Booth Street in Miramar. So that's also a highlight. Moving on to relationship with WCC, we are working collaboratively on multiple projects. Starting with the transition to the chip, well supported, and we are still supported by especially the Smart Council team. They're really helpful. We've got regular relationship meeting, which is organised by Paul here, just to discuss any issues and challenges, and that we can work together to achieve a satisfactory outcome for both parties. We are working very closely with the Hub 2 program team as well. Our main focus for Te Toi Mahana is to help with the rehousing component of that program, and it's going to ramp up, and we are gearing up for that operationally as well, Te Toi Mahana. Cool. On the engagement front, we are a major player in the Wellington Housing Placement Group with KO, MSD and other housing providers. The aim is to move people from emergency housing and transitional housing and help them settle in more of a long-term housing. So we're doing what we could to place them there. We've got two tenant focus groups set up on the policy and FM. These are the two main sort of focus areas for us and also for our tenants as well. Good engagement with the mana whenua, aiming to achieve a better outcome for Māori tenants and also for the community as a whole. And a good working relationship with HUD and community housing Aotearoa and the wider CHIP sector as well. So, focusing on our staff, our people, we have a strong leadership led by Angelique, which resulted in high performance culture. We've achieved 90 plus staff engagement rate, so people are really engaged and really committed, and they understand what we're trying to achieve. And it's also a continuous development opportunity with all the upcoming programs like Hub 2, and we're trying to prep for what's to come and for the growth of Te Toi Mahana as well. So some of the key achievements this year, we've become a living wage employer, received that accreditation. We've joined the Pride Pledge as well. Our tenant Kaitiaki made the final for the Wellington Airport Community Awards. So I think that's really important. It's the first time our tenant volunteers receive that level of recognition. I think it's really significant. And we also, Te Toi Mahana staff, we are the finalists in the Diversity and Inclusion Awards. Also been shortlisted and highlighted as finalists for the Best Place to Work awards as well this year. So that's a bit of summary.
Just moving on to financial sustainability, we've managed our operational costs well for the first year, and using that allocated establishment funding from council. The placement of the IRRS tenants has contributed $541,000 in revenue. That, combined with an increased occupancy rate, has meant that we've paid $15 million in rent to council, and that contributes straight to the Major Maintenance Development Fund. We are comfortable with where we are sitting from a financial sustainability perspective, but we're conscious that the operating context for social housing is currently under a period of change. There's obviously the well-publicised review of Kāinga Ora, and subsequently there's been notification around potential adjustments to the income-related rent subsidy. And tied with that, funding has been granted for 1,500 new social housing places, significantly for community housing providers. So whilst there's a degree of uncertainty, it's also an environment that we're well placed to capitalise on and improve our financial sustainability. We'd like to conclude our comments by saying that the Trust is really focused on continuing to work collaboratively and in a transparent way with Council in achieving very much its shared goals. Thank you.
All right, we do have some questions. Councillor Free has one.
Thank you. It's great to hear from you directly. Thank you for coming. Just a couple of questions on the new supply delivery. There was a chapter there, but it was said really basically nothing to report. But as a board, I think you'd be looking forward and thinking about this. How much thought is going into how this might take place, the long-term strategy or even short-term strategy around getting new supply?
So in relation to the gifted properties?
Well, I imagine that the idea was you were going to build up, surplus money and be able to do something with that. How much thought's going into a strategy there?
A lot of thought, and therefore not too much action over the last 12 months. It's been, I think we're kind of transitioning out of that establishment phase into steady state, and that's giving us the opportunity to explore what we have and what we want to do with it. We've been through a process of reviewing the properties that were available for gifting and selecting what might be most appropriate for us. And we've got a series of workshops coming up over the next couple of months to really plan how to do that effectively and how to resource that properly.
I have got another one, but I'll let some other people. Okay, just the 380 places that I think are still reserved for our chip. That's right? Is that right?
That's right. We've tried to see some clarification whether they can be rolled over to future financial years. We have not received a definite answer from HUD yet. They were still working through internally to see whether that's possible and what sort of implication it's going to have on the
Yeah, because this was a kind of a major reason for us setting up the chip, was taking advantage of that. So is there anything more that can be done to sort of make sure we take maximum?
Absolutely. We have a relationship meeting with HUD scheduled for mid-September, so I'm happy to provide further updates in our next report to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Tim, and thank you. And my first question is regards to the survey, what that looks like when it comes to inclusivity of that survey. Is that in different language, or is that only online or papers, or do you have different mechanisms to reach out to some of those communities?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, this year we've done it quite differently. We've translated that into the survey into 10 different languages. We've done some analysis of the different languages that were spoken within the community, and that was well received. We have received responses, I think that sort of help increase the response rate as a result.
Cool. I got another two. The second one is regards to the two, specifically the Granville tenant who used to live there. They moved into a new space, and it's also following the tragedy at the Lover's Lodge. There are people who given some housings. How happy are they with their current status? Is there a follow-up in their health and safety, plus also looking if they didn't like the place they're living? Because a lot of them promised at the time they will be given. This is a temporary, if a follow-up is happening in that space.
Yes, just to respond to that, we didn't get any information from the survey because it was anonymized, but our tenancy team do provide close support to the tenants that have been rehoused, and also whether, from the Lover's Lodge tragedy or from Granville rehousing, we are providing close support to them. And I think from the survey that people are feeling that it is, majority of the tenants feel that has contributed positively to their well-being, and we'll continue to monitor their space as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you again. What that community development looks like for the refugees and the ethnic community who might need more than the project that you currently have and the collaboration you have with some organizations, maybe in empowering them in areas that they have barriers for the children, like sport and some other areas, what that looks like when you talk about community development for those kids.
Right, so I think to be, inclusive with all the communities. I think we are at a very strong place because we recruit for diversity at Te Toi Mahana, and we're trying to provide the wide coverage and to make sure people have a wider understanding across the needs of different community groups. And I think in our youth engagement space, we hold regular events and activities trying to invite, we do letter drops to all the units and inviting people to come and join us in the planning activities. And especially with youth, I think it's about, making it fun and enjoyable experience for them as well. And we have a dedicated youth community development advisor, and he's doing a great job in that space.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Given this council is currently scheduled to spend roughly $47 million this year on upgrading some of the social housing units, how does that impact on the work of Te Toi Mahana? Because obviously planning on spending that much money, I don't know whether we will, but it's in the budget, or it was in the June figures. Just wanted to, are you comfortable that you'll be able to free up the housing to be able to do that?
Kia ora.
It's our housing. Is it the housing that they look after?
Kia ora, Councillor Calvert. I can give a brief update on this. Firstly, as Ms Proctor said, the full business case will be coming to you. What I can advise you is that at this stage, for the 24-25 year, there will be no need to rehome Te Toi Mahana tenants, as we'll be focusing on units that are currently empty. And so those units will then add to the rehousing capacity once that business case comes to you.
Thank you. And is Te Toi Mahana planning on, at the moment, it looks like you're making a very tiny surplus from an operating perspective, but the council itself, and I know that you're not the council, you're a separate trust, but we are ratepayers of funding sort of roughly $30 million a year. That's just very rough. Have you under the understanding that you will be increasing payments to Wellington City Council in terms of from an operating perspective?
Yes, we understand and acknowledge that that is the ultimate reason why Te Toi Mahana was established. So it is fundamental to the way that we're thinking about this. I think we need to be cognizant there's limited levers to be able to increase that at pace. And we are utilising each of those levers, particularly around increasing the number of IWRS tenancies. Obviously, once the HUP 2 programme has been established, that will increase capacity, and also, really carefully managing our operating expenses. But please be assured that it is, we understand the fundamental driver for why Te Toi Mahana was established.
And just one more, just about, one of the objectives is around new supply delivery. And so I know you've been very much focused on tenancy management and getting good results, and that's your skill set. But new supply delivery seems to be something new. How do you think you're, do you think you're able to deliver to the objectives to that in the timeline indicated, given that you're going to have to build up capability?
Sure, we will. We're considering options around that. There are some different options around how much of that capability is established in-house versus procuring that externally, so that we are not taking the risk during development. These options are being explored and weighed up, and we have a board detailed workshop to discuss in the next 2 months.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Phone.
Yeah, kia ora, great to see you. I'm very interested in the fund that was set aside to help the non-IRS tenants. And could you just elaborate a bit more on the challenges that you've had to try and distribute that fund? And then just a second question around the criteria. Like, I guess I just want to understand if the criteria the last council set is too tight or not enabling you to use that fund as you'd like.
Sure. We're conscious it's a fund that we want to utilise, and when we walked through the different options for that fund, we're really conscious that the primary focus should be to ameliorate the disparity in rent levels between IRS tenants and existing tenants, but we were equally keen not to spend the money too quickly, given the shifting government priorities and the uncertainty around IRS, and we really didn't want to spend that money and then create further disparity. So we determined as a board that the best use of the fund was to sit tight with it in the first instance. Meanwhile, it's ring fenced. It's earning 6.3% in a bank account at the moment, which will only kind of increase what we can do with it. But we're conscious it's a generous amount of money that we want to utilise to support tenants, but we want to do it in an appropriate and prudent manner. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
I'd just add one thing, that the parameters for use were set by DIA and not council.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think the most important thing with the use is that DIA stated quite categorically that the money can't be seen to be coming back to council and in a money go round or by way of rent. So it is a very challenging environment for the trust, which we as council acknowledge. Deputy Mayor Fu.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. First of all, a big bouquet for you. I came across one of your tenancy advisors at a meeting that I was at a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke very, very highly of how everything was going and thought that you were managing the operation very, very well, so well done. One question I have is that you have a lot of different ethnicities in your apartments. So do you have a program to actually help them to integrate with each other? Because, or do they actually sort of just mix, with their own sort of groups and sort of not mix with a general group at all?
Yeah, I think be inclusive is a big focus of all our community initiatives and activities, and I think internally to prep our staff, and we've set up a program. Last month in our monthly meeting, we invited the Chief Executive of Ministry for Ethnic Communities, Mervyn Singham, to come and give us a talk. And I think that level of upskilling internally is important. That will then enable us to provide a better connection, and in terms of the how, in terms of the how to bring the communities together. And I think that's a big step towards that. Yes.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. Good to hear the good news. And it's good to see you took the Pride Pledge. I'm just wondering what that means on the ground for improvements for the rainbow communities in your housing.
Right, so that was a first step, similar to the diversity and inclusion initiative, is to build up and creating the safe operating environment for our staff, and then so we can then deliver more fit for purpose services. So general understanding of each other, and make sure it's a safe environment for our tenants as well. So our first year of doing that, so there'll be more work to come in the diversity and inclusion space.
Okay, so would you be happy to come and talk to our Rainbow Advisory Group about the work that you're doing and get some feedback?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And can you just remind me, the tenant representatives, how does that structure actually work in terms of empowering tenants to have, some more control over their lives and their own housing?
Great. Yes, it's the tenant tenant focus group was set up to try to give our tenant a different channel to voice their concerns, and the two areas being the facility maintenance, which is about 80% of the feedback that we receive, and also the have a say in the policy, general policy, housing policy making. So we did express of interest and invite people to put in their EOIs to be part of the group, and we also communicated that through our newsletters. So to encourage people to participate, and now we've got I think 7 or 5 members actually for the policy group at the moment, and we've got 4 tenant representatives, and that there's no limit, but obviously we have to manage it in a way that everyone can have their say as well, so it doesn't get too big.
Okay. Last question, pets. Pets, yeah, really important for some people's well-being. So I presume you still don't let anyone have a pet at the moment, with the changes to the government policy around this?
Yeah, so we're monitoring that piece of legislation very carefully, including the pet bond discussion. So so there's something that we're prepared to adapt.
So what does that mean in practice? Like, are people going to be able to bring in a cat or a small dog?
Yeah, once the amendment bill goes through the Parliament, we're happy to
have a look at that.
Consider that.
Okay,
Yes.
but that's brilliant. I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Wineta.
Good morning. So I first just want to check some figures. So you have 2,700-ish tenants, of whom about 110 are IRRS, is that correct?
It's more than that now. I think it's about 130 that the numbers we set out were for the financial year.
Cool. So what are the major barriers to growth of that IRRS percentage?
Turnover of tenants, really. We can't ship an existing tenant out and replace them with an IRRS tenant. So it's going to be a natural function of two things: turnover of tenants and provision of new spaces.
I see. And the folks who are already there, what are the barriers for them getting on that scheme?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, the folks who are already there, so the rest of the tenants, what are the barriers to them getting onto that scheme?
I guess it's hard. They will have to approve them case by case, and we have been successful in getting them.
Thanks.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I noticed that particularly in this report, you're only bringing, this is on Part 6, risk reporting, you're only bringing us the issues that have a residual risk rating that is still high. I guess my question was around where the legislative environment sits on that risk register, particularly the funding mechanisms underpinning some of our things like the growth of IRS. What does the change look like that? And I'm, I guess, casting my mind back to the recent changes and transfers that happened, although that affected Te Toi Mahana in a different way. If you could perhaps explain, I guess, the process and perhaps what changed with the transfers, that would be useful. The government settings and the changes in that space very much form part of our strategic risk, and our risk register is something that is reviewed on a monthly basis by the ELT and on an ongoing basis by the Risk and Audit Committee. It's a live document. This is a live environment that we're working in, and so we are really cognizant of the risks there and take what steps we can to try and mitigate that. I guess my other question was around the transfers that we had set aside for our HUP 2 funding and Te Toi Mahana being time limited, and you mentioned you talking to HUD about extending the time available for that. Whether looking at our turnover rate, are we currently forecasting that we would be able to utilise all of those places? Are we forecasting that we wouldn't be fully utilising those places and some of them may expire?
That will be the centre of discussion now when we catch up with HUD next, is to provide that level of certainty and those numbers.
Councillor Calvert.
This might be more for the WCC officers, but can you just tell me a little bit about the governance arrangements under Clause 17 of the paper and about the Relationship Management Group and the Major Maintenance and Development Fund Committee? Who is on that? And I don't need specific officer names, but at what level, and are there trustees on there? If you could just outline a little bit more about that.
With pleasure, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair. The Relationship Management Group is scheduled to meet once approximately every 6 weeks. Representing Council, we have Ms Proctor, Catherine Mearman and Euston Burke. And from the CHIP, we have their CEO and 2 of their senior leadership team. In relation to the Major Maintenance and Development Fund, quarterly meetings, again represented at a Tier 2 and 3 level from Council. All expenditure through the Major Maintenance Fund then goes through Ms Proctor as Senior Responsible Officer. The fund is in effect owned by Council, and that committee makes recommendations for expenditure through her.
Okay, thank you. I know we talked about the IRS increasing, and meaning, that helps with the operational expenses of the trust. But I'm seeing in what this council is funding, we're having to increase our subsidy by 50%. I'm talking in the operating expenses over the next 2 years. So I can't understand why the council's costs are increasing when supposedly Te Toi Mahana are getting presumably more income through income-related rents as more people move onto it.
We own the assets, Councillor Calvert, and there are costs associated with that. However, what we're very pleased to see is that through the increased IRRS and the lease agreement, the Trust will be returning to the fund an additional $1 million. I can also report that the fund itself, in an operating environment, is going to return a surplus of close to $700,000. The agreements are working, and those contributions can be used to offset HUP2 costs and the costs of ownership, as we demonstrated and answered in the Q&A document.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
2 questions. The first one is, when it comes to insurance, is Te Toi Mahana insured as part of the $800 million insurance for the council, or is that separately insured?
Council insures its housing assets as we're the business, as we're the asset owner, Councillor.
Okay.
Also, just to clarify, Te Toi Mahana.
So the transferred properties, we will be responsible for insurance, those on the Te Toi Mahana side.
So basically, we got about 700 million property. How much of that is insured by Te Toi Mahana? How much of that is insured by?
All but the gifted properties.
The 10 million one. The rest is insured through council.
Yes.
Okay, my second one is, I think since this is a very diverse community, it's a very typical of what New Zealand looks like. I think sometimes when we bring a policy is a bit of, aware what that means. Example, the pets one. And yeah, just a bit of a comment there.
All right. Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much again. I was speaking to a previous tenant of the Dixon Street flats, and she said that there's quite a big difference between the Dixon Street flats and where she is now. And she said that one of the problems that she had at Dixon Street was that there appeared to be gang members in there doing drug deals and things. Her neighbour was had frequent visitors coming and going, and that's what it looked like they were doing. But she hasn't noticed any of this at the new flats. And so what sort of policies do you have, or do you have a policy to actually keep an eye out for that, to make sure that this doesn't actually ever start? Thank you.
I guess that's probably more of an operational level than a policy level. We work very closely with the police and also community supporting agencies, and we also have tenancy advisors position, and also the kaitiaki group that they are really valuable. They give us on the ground intel of anything that's happening, and we act on it as soon as we know something that's not going right. And I think those partnerships with especially with police, and also dedicated resources and supporting tenant with, and also managing them closely under the Residential Tenancies Act. It's important to address them early on rather than let them, sort of blow up and then try to tackle them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, team. That brings us to the end of the questions. Appreciate all of those fulsome answers.
Thank you for allowing us this time.
Thank you. Great stuff. Councillor Rogers is going to move the paper.
Kia ora, colleagues. Thank you for letting us move this paper. I just wanted to, bring out some of my observations for the report that I think are important to us. One of the ones was the sort of line of questioning that I had around specifically transfers. IRRS funding is incredibly important to the model of Te Toi Mahana, and I think we should be paying close attention to any change in the regulatory environment or the funding environment that might mean that there are less IRS places available for us, and in particular making sure that Te Toi Mahana is going to be able to fully utilise the IRS places that are available to them in our existing agreements. So it's good to see that the IRS tenancies actually more than doubled in the last quarter, and good to hear that they've even increased since the report was written. It was also good for me to see, as someone who does care a lot about the affordability of these units for tenants, that despite a rent review taking place for the first time in 2 years, rent arrears was still decreasing, which to me suggests that it is more affordable, or at least it's easier for tenants to pay. Also very good to see the occupancy rate coming back up, and again coming back to the wellness of tenants. Really good to see some of those recommendations that came out of the mayoral task force investigation into the quality of life for tenants in public housing being fully committed to, and seeing the fruit of that through community events, a community garden, all of those things that people really said were important to them and their tenancies. So look forward to you receiving this report and allowing Te Toi Mahana to continue coming back to us and giving us this timely information.
Thank you, Councillor. Puiwi Hohaia, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak? Thank you. Is there any further debate? Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. I think it's really great to see some progress in this area, but I just want to make a few comments. Example, when it's come to community development, what that looks like. If we continue with the normal kind of funding that we have to the new community that arrived, or to some of the very diverse communities, that wouldn't work. A good example would be, it might work, but not to all. New Kind Climate Resilience Fund. That is really good for some of our community members, for someone who comes from refugee background, for a young person who came from a war-torn area. Talking about the climate resilience is not an urgent issue. Having fun, sport activities outside is something that they would like to be exploring, and the funding should be reflecting in every funding that we're giving to those kind of organizations. And the other one is they're trying their best, but I still hear some issues with some of the tenants who moved from Granville residents and from the Loafers Lodge, and they need a bit of a better places. I think that needs to be addressed to some extent. It's something that needs to be worked internally with our officers, and we got a responsibility to follow up. It's not only we just celebrate that day and then every year we just go back and just remember those who lost their life. We need to support those who are alive. We need to follow up, and what that looks like needs to be supported by the funding as well. The last point is I want to address how some member of this council keep asking, we're spending a lot of money in the housing. It might look a lot, But to bring it to your attention, this year, if we are spending about 40+ million for the renewal of about 700 million worth of our properties, we are spending equal amount to move our office from here to the new one. That is a comparison for you, and thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora. So yeah, just want to acknowledge the team at Te Toimahana and the board. That was excellent reading the report, and just acknowledge the work and the transition of 1 year, and that you're on track and financial sustainability is there, because for those that have been around the council for a few years, it was nicknamed the graph of doom for a very long time, and so we no longer have that. So thank you for that, mahi. I just do want to say, I do want to keep a close pedal to the metal on the grant, because I am concerned that we're not distributing that fast enough for the purpose it was set, and that our tenants it's a cost of living crisis at the moment, and I know that would be greatly appreciated. So keen to see that being used. But I do just want to acknowledge some of the great initiatives that are going on. It was great to see the Kaitiaki group as finalists at the YL Community Tenant Kaitiaki group. They were so excited about their being a finalist and their nomination, and it is just great to see them lifting up in that capacity, so thank you for that. Excited about the living wage employer, that's a wonderful thing to champion. And just yesterday I had the pleasure of going to listen to the wellbeing study done by the Otago University Sustainable Cities faculty on the marakai at Pukehino. And actually the outcomes of that, as they said, words don't do it justice, but the garden at Pukehino is bringing a reduction in substance use, connection to fellow tenants, mostly because they prefer to connect in natural light, not inside. Like, I found that amazing, and that the space that has been created is feeling safer and more loved, and more tenants are enjoying the space of being there, and there was even a marriage in there. So it's quite exciting to hear that transformation of space being used and the well-being it is bringing to the tenants there. So I just really want to thank everyone for the mahi in behind that. Kia ora.
Councillor Free.
Yes, thank you. And I agree that there was a lot of good news in that report, and particularly that they're going to be having a workshop in a couple of months to sort of nut through some of the longer term strategies in relation to increasing supply and doing what they can to, take advantage of that 380 IRRS places. But I think it's really incumbent on us to keep a very close eye on this. I mean, we've got a very big amount of our capital assets now transferred, and it's our responsibility, I believe, to keep a really close scrutiny on how this is going. It was good also to hear that there's been a small surplus. I mean, you always want to hear that rather than the other way. I think I appreciated the board coming to speak to us, because I could see that they were focused on this achieving the goals that we set it up to achieve. That was good. I'm actually struggling a little bit with recommendation 2. I'm sorry, I was distracted and I should have asked a question. I don't see how we can note this. I think we could agree to do this. But I actually have a problem noting something when what we're basically doing is, I think, changing the delegation from council receiving this to
Yeah, so it isn't a change of the delegation. Perhaps, I'm not sure if DEM Services can answer this. But it's not a change to the delegation of the committee, it's just that item came to.
Yeah, I just feel uncomfortable noting it. It sort of seems very passive about something I think we should be agreeing to. That's just my point. I don't know if there's any willingness by leave of the meeting to change that. Otherwise, I don't think I'll be sporting just noting this.
Could we just have a quick response from DEM Services about?
So I guess this is just noting that previously this was considered by the Social, Cultural and Economic Committee, so not council, but the other committee. And it sort of falls halfway between the delegations of that committee and this one, because it's a performance report which comes here, but it's about an item that, the other committee established.
So my point is that I think it needs to be agreed not just with the committee chairs, the respective chairs, but by us. And I'm certainly happy to agree to it. I think it's quite appropriate it comes here because, as I said, we need to be keeping a monitoring view of this now. But I don't like the idea that we're just noting that something's been agreed by other people or a subset of the committee.
Okay, we can change it to agree with the leave of the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Councillor Pannett.
Thank you, Chair. Look, so some of you remember that I was the one vote opposing the establishment of this organisation for political reasons, because I have concerns about council losing functions. But anyway, I do want to congratulate the staff and the tenants on their successes over the last year. Just a couple of points. The rent arrears point that you made, Councillor Rogers, I think is a fair point, but I'd also just ask then, what are you not spending money on if you can afford your rent? Times are tough at the moment, so, my preference is that people are given as much assistance as they can to eventually move into their own place as possible. And I guess one of the reasons I have some reticence around social housing is that it takes control away from people. There are a lot of people who make decisions for you instead of you being able to make those decisions. And I appreciate this is a complex environment and people have got specific challenges. So while it's good that there are some advisory groups, it would be good to see more power being transferred over tenants, but I'll take that offline with the trust. I'm glad that there's been movements made in the Pride space and look forward to some more achievement in that area. We need to, I think as my colleague here makes the point, the community development and meeting the needs of various communities is important. It's a complex one, so hopefully they can manage that, but it is not an easy task to balance the needs of so many different communities within one place. And just the last point that I would like to strongly support the Trust making a move to allow tenants to have pets. I appreciate that there are some complexities around that, but I think the overall benefits to tenants who wish to have them outweighs any costs, and saying that there may need to be NGOs that provide support because pets can be relatively expensive, but just in terms of providing that well-being to the tenants and also to our animal friends, it's a win-win. Kia ora.
Councillor Calvert.
Well, I agree with one comment of Councillor Pannett, and that was I do support having pets with the right controls in place. So you have my support on that. I found this debate and discussion really interesting because we focused a lot on the tenancy management aspect, and that's good because we want to be good tenancy managers. And it's important that we, and I just want to say that I support social housing. But we also have a duty and a governance role to make sure that we are managing our assets as best as we can. And we are also being transparent about that because at the end of the day, these assets belong to the people of Wellington and it's their money that's being spent. And we know about the cost of living crisis, not only for tenants, but for all Wellingtonians, whether they're renters or they're homeowners. And we talked about what it's now financial. It's on a track to be financially stable, and this graph of doom. I'd just like to. I suggest some of you go back and look at 2021 when we had that graph of doom. The figures facing this council are no different. It's still the same. Even with putting in the system with the IRS, this council, from a CapEx perspective, outside of water, this is the highest spending item, $592 million, we're going to be spending it over 10 years. Now, I'm not saying that's not warranted, but if I'm going to spend $600 million, I'm sure we must be able to look at the most effective way, and I appreciate there's a paper coming to us on that. But we are also subsidizing the operating expenses by over $325 million over 10 years. Now, because we've got a rule that it's ring-fenced away from ratepayers, we're putting that all on our debt. So operating expenses on the debt. So, and that's not sustainable. And that $325 million is a lot. Well, we're also not depreciating the assets as much as we should. If you look at our long-term plan, we've said that this 25% we're not covering in our costs. So we have a graph of doom. We don't have financial stability. And I know officers have factored that into the 10-year plan. And I can say we're going to have to fund $19 million this year, roughly. Maybe we can save $1 million, but that's still a significant amount.
That's 3 minutes, Councillor.
That rises to $29 million in 2 years' time. So I think we need to make sure we can peel back some layers, because I don't think we've got the transparency that we need, because we need to ensure that we have not only this council, but also Te Toi Mahana has the capability to deliver what we expect. And I won't be supporting recommendation 2. Te Toi Mahana has 9 trustees. A third of them sit round this table. I am actually really concerned that, again, there's this level creeping in, and coming to the long-term plan committee, chaired by a trustee, I am concerned by that. If it was under the social, we had a different chair who does not sit as a trustee. And I think we need, from a transparency perspective, we do need to keep that separate, because it's very rare for a council organisation to have a third of the trustees members of this table. You may get one, so it's not the same influence. And not the same involvement by our officers in various committees that help work with that. So I won't be supporting that, because I do not think, and I don't think it aids transparency around the operations of the organisation, and because of the money cost. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to support Councillor Calvert and Councillor Free. I think, clearly Te Toi Mahana was established for financial reasons, and the primary one was to provide access to IRRS, and that has obviously been progressed. The other is because we believe that there is going to be the potential to actually do cost-efficient development of the properties. So that the properties, the 34 units that have been sold on a concessionary basis to Te Toi Mahana, were ones which council had a liability for. So not only does council actually transfer the properties, but of course it has absolved itself of the liability in respect of the HUP too. I think that we're at a very starting phase of this process. I think the quality of the board is very good. I mean, I'd just like to defend my two fellow, my fellow councillor and the Pauiwi representative. As it happens, Liz Kelly is not on the board, care of her involvement with the Wellington City Council. She was chosen independently of the council. So the council was only allowed to actually appoint 2 people from council, and Councillor Matthews and I were those 2 people. Councillor Kelly brings a massive amount of experience in this space because she's involved with a similar community housing provider in Porirua, and she's incredibly practical and really a huge benefit around the table. So I actually feel that we've got a very good board. We've got a good management team and a lot of focus. But the issue is that it's the first year in what is going to be a longish journey, and I would kind of agree with you that so far progress has been slow because there's been a lot of setup type issues involved. There's a lot of transitional issues, but going forward, I really hope that this entity can not only actually improve its revenue situation, care of the government subsidies through the IRRS tenants, but it can actually do very cost-efficient development of properties. And I, I mean, as you're well aware, you support the Te Kāinga initiative, and that is a really interesting example of a really innovative provision of affordable, not social, affordable housing into the Wellington market, which has been incredibly successful. It doesn't involve the use of council capital, but I would say that there are ways such as that which we will look at through Te Toimahana to see if there are more cost-efficient ways to provide housing. I, for one, do not support the City Council and the ratepayers being obliged to meet a very large amount of social housing cost, I think, 800 million in the LTP, when I see that as a core government responsibility. And it is something which I think if we can show that we can do a great job cost efficiently, and we can actually get additional funding from government, it could be a real win-win both for our tenants, for the community of Wellington, and ultimately our ratepayers. But I definitely am not forgetting the ratepayers of that mix.
I would just like to encourage you to support 2, and just to note that the reason that this recommendation is being made is because it is consistent with the types of reporting that we have to this committee, and that I would assure you that there will be exactly the same level of rigour and transparency as there would have been previously. Councillor Rogers, right of reply?
Yeah, I think Councillor Brown has addressed many of the financial prudence points I was going to speak to. The one that I was also going to speak to was around the perceived conflict, which I do not agree with around this table. I think as a council, we have appointed members of this council to represent the interests of this council on that board, and it is entirely appropriate for the people who are representing our interests to share the results of the work that they've done, and for us around this table to scrutinise that work. I've found the people who are sitting on that board have been very forthcoming and willing to help me understand some of the information of the board, and I believe that the feedback that I provide to them is fully represented in the board meetings of Te Toimahana. So just wanted to put that in the debate as well, to acknowledge the work that many of our councillors do sitting on boards of many CCOs and representing our interests, and making sure that those interests are the same of the constituents that we serve.
All right, we'll go to the vote. I assume you want to take those separately? All right, so we'll do point 1. Councillor Abdirahman? That is carried, and we'll move to point 2. And that has carried. We will now break for morning tea, and we will come back at 1:45. To our next item, which is the submission to the MFE consultation on the second National Emissions Reduction Plan. No Mai, Alison and Mike. Could you introduce the report for us? Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just cover the key points that are in our submission and the cover letter. MFE have asked for feedback on their second emissions reduction plan. So New Zealand has a 2050 target that is broken down domestically into emissions budgets that sort of lay out what we're trying to achieve in each 5-year block to get to 2050. And the purpose of this emissions reduction plan is to make sure that we meet those budgets. The overall view that we've expressed in this submission is that the proposed plan is less ambitious than the previous plan. So several initiatives from the first plan have been cancelled, and the focus of the second plan is on a handful of key initiatives as opposed to a broader, more comprehensive approach. The government sees the ETS as the key tool to achieve emissions reduction, complemented by forestry and offsetting. The Climate Change Commission very helpfully have produced their first monitoring report, and they have assessed that there is moderate to significant risk that the second and third emission budgets won't be met with current policy settings. We agree. In terms of our city reduction commitments, this second emissions reduction plan reduces the level of effort in key areas that matter for our city. There is, for example, a lack of clarity on how climate change considerations will be incorporated into the urban planning framework. The GPS on land transport is not aligned with reducing emissions. We agree with the Climate Change Commission that there is a need for significantly more investment in public and active transport networks. And we also think it is important to accelerate the Building for Climate Change program and the work to support emissions reductions from a circular economy model, both of which are paused under this government. The consultation also asked for feedback on equity and what policies and initiatives could address distributional impacts. So the ETS is a blunt tool that rises prices across, and so you need to put in complementary policies and initiatives that address those distributional impacts and ensure equity. Our feedback in this space is the government should return to ring-fencing the income of the New Zealand ETS to fund these complementary policies. Their draft plan sees income from the New Zealand ETS return to general income, and their key mechanism for offsetting any cost of living impacts is general tax relief, so not targeted. In our opinion, that will not address the distributional impacts and only softens the price signal the ETS is designed to give in the economy. If you were to ring-fence that money again, you could spend it on policies that increase options for our residents to reduce their emissions. For example, increased investment in public and active transport, support for low-income households to electrify their energy needs, and we would also like to see funding for the Climate Action Hub that was proposed in the last plan and is now cancelled, so that our residents could have access to quality information on effective emissions reduction options. We finish our submission with a description of our commitments as a city and a council. Our city goal is to reduce emissions by 57% between 2020 and 2030 and to net zero by 2050. We have limited land for forestry regeneration. Our focus as a city must remain on driving down gross emissions and not being reliant on sequestration to meet our targets. Our approach aligns with our residents' levels of concern and expectation. In our 2023 survey, 84% of residents considered climate change impacts are already being felt in our capital city, and over half of Wellingtonians tell us that significant reductions are needed now. We are responding to this. We are building on our compact urban form and well-utilised public and active transport networks with district plan settings that encourage housing around our active and public transport networks, and our investments in infrastructure that prioritises pedestrians, buses and bicycles. We're also investing significantly in reducing emissions from waste with the building of our sludge processing facility and the inclusion of curbside collection of organics in our recent long-term plan. In our own operations, we are transitioning our vehicles to electric vehicles and replacing fossil fuel gas systems in our swimming pools with heat pump technology. We finish our submission by making the point that we are ambitious However, our ability to act and meet the scale of change needed also requires greater central government action, regulation and funding. This consultation is due on the 21st of August, so we humbly seek your approval and any feedback on our key points that we have raised.
All right, we'll move to questions. The first one is from Councillor Free.
Thank you, Alison. You just pricked up my ears on something, and it might be Siobhan to answer this or yourself, but you mentioned the government is not ring-fencing the ETS funding.
Yeah.
So does that have an implication for our plan to have waste hubs and to do the collections we're expecting to do?
No, the government funds those through the Waste Minimisation Act and the Waste Levy, so that's a separate pool of ring-fenced funding.
Good. Long may it stay so.
We had ring-fenced funding for the New Zealand ETS, the Emissions Reduction Fund, and they've unring-fenced it.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I mean, obviously, this government have indicated a significant move towards ETS as opposed to direct initiatives, which I personally am strongly in favour of. But also, as you say here, you need to provide social, subsidies or assistance, and that. And it feels to me as if our submission needs to focus more on the ETS and the social support. Because it both, well, my question is this, is that we don't really talk here about the pricing signals that we are now going to be, effectively, the government policy it's all about pricing signals, isn't it? And I noticed that when we've actually do use pricing signals in our own economic analysis of climate-related initiatives, we're actually using very high prices, which I think actually might have come from an old...
We really need to focus question.
But my question is, why didn't we have more focus on the pricing signals because
I think you've asked it, Tim.
No, I'm not asking you, I'm asking
There's
you.
a detailed table, which I haven't covered all of the content of, and in there are questions on the ETS and pricing signals, and we have answered that. We haven't made it a point in the cover letter that we should have a higher price in the ETS. We should, but we haven't covered that in the cover letter. I'm happy to put that in if that's the point you're trying to make, that the price should be higher.
Am I allowed to? She's asking me a question. I'm allowed to answer it.
Only if you answer it very quickly. I think I think your point has been conceded to.
Yeah, no. Look, I just feel like we should, because the problem which we've got is that we're doing stuff which is justified by a high carbon price, and in fact, whether it's government policies or a screw up in the ETS, but we've got a very low ETS pricing. So there's a bit of a disconnect, isn't there? And I just feel like
I think we've got an agreement that we can strengthen that point in the cover letter.
Lovely.
Councillor Pannett.
From a different perspective. Anyway, thank you very much, and I like the general direction of the submission. A couple of questions. Basically, the RONS is one of the big planks of the national government's economic development strategy, and it's a lot of money. You haven't really mentioned that.
Sorry, which is?
The RONS.
RONS?
Roads of National Significance, the Recycled Transport Program. And because it's a serious amount of money, was there any reason why you didn't include that?
In our submission table, I do refer to the approach of the Welsh government.
And the GPS.
Where they have assessed all of their transport projects against the climate emergency and cancelled virtually all of their roads of national significance projects. So I do give an example of what it looks like to apply a climate emergency lens to a transport policy. But I've stopped short in the cover letter being too blunt.
No, I was interested in the table. Next question I've got is the building section. So 2 questions around that. First of all, why have we not said that we have cut our money to help decarbonise buildings in the last LTP? Why are we telling the government it needs to do more when we're not exactly, shifting our weight here?
From an officer's perspective, having government regulate for a higher standing standard of buildings is far more effective than offering incentives for better buildings. That has always been our position. If there is uniform agreement around the table to add that to the submission, I'm happy to add it in.
So can I get clarification from you? The government, probably any government of any stripes, is probably unlikely to put the standard to a high enough level to really make a dent in emissions. So the point of the subsidy is to try and close that gap. Can you just provide a response to that point?
I think the Building for Climate Change program was very strong and was heading in absolutely the right direction. So the point in the submission is that we would like the government to pick that program back up. Recently, central government policy was walking away from some of the insulation, the increase in insulation standards, for example.
All right, thank
you. Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. It seems to me, reading through this letter, that what we're saying is that, hey, look, we're going to spend this money on this, we're going to spend that money on that, we're going to spend this money on, and so it goes on. And so it seems like we don't seem to realise that
this is a question, Councillor.
The question is that can we actually defer that? Would it make any difference that we actually deferred this for 5 years or whatever? Because we're not considering the cost to the average resident in Wellington.
The cost-benefit analysis of reducing emissions early is strongly in favour of reducing emissions early, because the cost of adaptation and coping with the impacts of climate change are far higher and more destructive than the cost of reductions. There is a time frame in which you need to achieve those reductions to have any hope of avoiding unaffordable adaptation. So yes, there would be a large impact of any delay. We need to reduce emissions as quickly as possible. Arguably, the amount of money that we're spending is still not sufficient for us to support the city to achieve its 2030 target. So if you want my office's advice, it would be to spend more on addressing the climate emergency than other priorities in the long-term plan, in my capacity as your official advisor on climate change emergency issues.
I'm worried about going down a rabbit hole that is not directly relevant to the submission, Councillor. So we are not amending our LTP here. So if you have a question about the submission, Councillor, then...
Our target for 2030 is actually a self-imposed target, isn't it? It's a target that we actually set ourselves.
We're also not debating our target here. This is about our submission on the government. So if you have a question about the submission...
Okay, I oppose the submission.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Randall.
So I just wondered, in terms of the submission, what is the difference in terms of New Zealand emissions between the amount that the government recommends that we follow and the amount that the submission recommends?
Do you mean what is the gap between our opinion in this submission of how much the government should reduce emissions and their plans? The Climate Change Commission has done that analysis in their monitoring report and assessed that the policy positions that are current and proposed create moderate to significant risk that we won't meet the emission budgets that have been set by the government. It is our officer position that those budgets are not sufficiently low enough, so it is a worry that the policies are not have been judged by the Climate Change Commission as not sufficient to meet those budgets. Does that answer your question? So it's kind of, somebody's done a lot of work to analyse that, and the policies are not strong enough to meet the government's budgets.
I was thinking more based on the submission that it seems that the amount of emissions reduction that the government is now requiring is lower than the amount that the City Council believes is needed.
Correct.
And I just want to know what the difference is.
The difference is fairly significant. The government's national determined contribution is a 30% reduction from 2020 gross emissions to 2030 net emissions. Our reduction target is 57% between 2020 and 2030. Ours was set using the WWF's One Planet City methodology, so it's a science-based target.
Okay, but they're all percentages. I just wanted the amount.
I don't know the amount in tonnes, sorry. Our emissions inventory was roughly 1 million in 2020, and we are targeting roughly less than 500,000 in 2030.
That's CO2 tonnes.
Tonnes of CO2.
Millions of tonnes.
Yep.
Okay. And
the national inventory is in the order of megatons.
yeah, well, I mean, megatons is like we've got 1 megaton.
Yep.
At the moment, and what's New Zealand's total emissions?
I
don't know.
Okay.
I think we're really getting into the weeds here, and I think this curiosity. I mean, you're sure you're open to these questions via email, general questions about this. Okay. That has brought us to the end of the questions. Thank you. I'm going to take a brief adjournment because I just want to check if either of the issues that were raised by Councillor Brown or Pannett, we need to amend our motion, which I don't really want to do, but I just want to check. So we'll have a 5-minute break. Yeah, and you're not. Because if you were going to move an amendment, you would have already organised before this meeting, Councillor. And also you don't like doing submissions by amendment, as you said the other week. So thank you, Alison and Mike. And Councillor O'Neill is going to move the paper.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Today, although it seems mundane, we're at a bit of a pivotal moment in Aotearoa's history, one that will shape the future of our land, our people and our planet. 6 years ago, I cut my teeth developing the Zero Carbon Act with a goal to have Aotearoa net zero carbon by 2050. That target was aspirational but a momentous time, and the National Party supported it too. In this proposal, the government starts their document by celebrating the slowdown of emissions reduction. However, the Climate Change Commission has debunked this, that although emissions have dropped over recent years, this is largely a result of factors outside of the government's control. We got lucky with some good weather for hydro, sky-high fossil fuel prices, and an economy that decided to chill out for a bit. But let's face it, luck isn't a strategy. If it were, the All Blacks would just show up to the Rugby World Cup and hope everyone else caught the flu. The government's put out the second admissions reduction plan with quite a significant change from the last budget. Although it seems rather technical, the previous government had a focus on preventative measures for the ETS, and this government is focusing on unavailable tech fixes, an obsession with pine trees, and the ETS balancing scheme. The ETS, while it is an important tool, relying on it to do the heavy lifting through a price mechanism is not enough. The market alone cannot drive systemic change required to make more sustainable choices across the sectors. The government seems to think it's the magic bullet that's going to do all the heavy lifting, except newsflash, it's not gonna. The government's idea and then we've got the government's idea to rely on as of yet unavailable tech fixes, sounding a lot like my ex-colleague Sean Rush and his ability to talk about saving the planet. You know, like those sci-fi movies when someone invents a gadget that fixes everything at the last minute, but the government's banking on some yet to be invented tech to slash emissions, especially in agriculture. We need action now and not the promise of a futuristic wonder gadget. Lastly, just to touch on, speaking of dodgy strategies, let's talk about their love affair of planting pines, and not the good kind. This government has a significant step away from stopping emissions at the source and moving to this balancing exercising. They've specifically also included in their paper reference to private investment for pine forests on Crown land that is described as low conservation value land. Land we know still has keen interest from iwi and environmental groups. Make no mistake, it's creating a climate for greenwashing profit over genuine community-led and mataranga Māori solutions. They're banking on forests to suck up all the nasty carbon, but folks, that's like relying on trees to do all the work is asking your nan to do an Olympic sprint. It's just not fair and it's not going to end well. Within the context of Aotearoa, private pine forests do a great deal more harm to our ecology as well. As mentioned by Alison in the introduction of the report, 84% of Wellingtonians already feel the impacts of climate change. It's not some far off in the distance proposition that many of us won't have to worry about. It's impacting our residents today. We're doing our part, but without central government stepping in, it's like fighting a wildfire with a garden hose. New Zealand needs a plan that's ambitious. That's as ambitious as our challenges. We need more ETS reliance, or we don't need more ETS reliance, more tech dreams, and a lot more than just planting trees. We need policies that support all Kiwis, especially those hit hardest by the rising costs. So to the government, stop faffing about and give us a plan that's fit for purpose. We'll do our bit, but you've got to do yours too. Councillor Wineta is going to second.
Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Wineta?
Only to say that Pinus radiata is my mortal enemy, and I feel a savage joy when I burn it in a fire, akin to felling the walls of Jericho and marching inside.
All right. Now, we are going to move to debate, and I just want to quickly note before we enter that debate that we have not got lunch today. So just to motivate you all, and we will use the timer, Councillor Free, sorry.
I just want to say that I think this is a good submission. I think we do need to make a strong case because climate change is actually going to cost local government. It's not, central government makes the policies, but we are going to pick up the tab for fixing things and strengthening things. And yesterday I was at a community meeting where the airport came to speak to the eastern suburb, to the Strathmore Residents Association about the tens of millions of dollars needed to strengthen the southern seawall. Just to repair and strengthen it. No, it's not an extension. Just calm down. But it literally is they're talking about the wave energy, the extra height of the waves, but the actual extra energy in the waves and the consequences of the design and the extra cost. And that's just the next few years. This isn't going away anytime soon. And it would be tempting to say, and a lot of people do say, that what difference can we make as a medium-sized city in a very small nation? But if everybody took that attitude, we would really truly be in a pickle. So I think it is very incumbent on us to do our bit and incumbent on us to actually speak strongly to the government that they need to lead in this really important area, and that they need to be stronger. This really isn't enough, and I'm glad that our submission says so.
Councillor Pennant.
I'd like to thank Councillor O'Neill for her excellent speech. She said it very well. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised because this is a government or coalition full of climate deniers, so it's completely predictable. And while I love recycling, they have been spectacularly good at it, just recycling the policies from the early 2010s, you know. And so while I appreciate the officers making an allusion to Wales, you know, we need to be really clear that this government loves building roads, believes that this is the key to unlocking economic potential by saving, you know, 1 minute on your journey time or whatever. Except at a very, very high cost financially and to the planet. You know, these are very, very tired and old solutions that don't work. And just this is brief. I do just want to say it's great that the council is telling the government what to do in the building space, but we are not doing some of the heavy lifting here. Colleagues, swimming pools are not the major cause of climate change on our planet. It's actually the building and construction sector is one of the big ones, and we stripped out money through our LTP to help with this problem, because while it might be good for the government to do some regulation, if this government or this coalition is in power for another long 8 years, we're not going to get the progress that we need to see. You know, local government has a role to play in the space, and you know, my view is that there is a deep sensitivity around building emissions because of also the agenda around building more housing. You know, we have to build green. It's not just where you build, it's how you do it is absolutely critical. But look, this is a good submission, so I hope everyone will support it. You know, the point is made, and it's very good from officers, that the ETS just cannot do the heavy lifting. At the end of the day, if we need to use a resource, like to have a shower or to get somewhere using some form of transport, we will, and price is just not enough. You have to provide the systems and the structures that will work for people. And just want to finally strongly endorse Councillor O'Neill's point around those who've got the least resources in our community. They need to be subsidised. The argument that we can't make change because of people on low incomes is not a coherent one, but obviously I see the justice in this, that people without the means to make the transition rapidly needs the support to do so.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just want to thank the team for the excellent submission on behalf of Wellington City Council, and I do want to acknowledge the experience that our team have, which in the field, and just that we should have a lot of confidence in the mahi and the understanding that they bring to us. And also just want to acknowledge the strong alignment with Te Atakura, and I do want to thank the council and the councils before us that we even have that to align our submission to, so thanks for that. I just want to acknowledge a couple of points that that this council in the submission disagrees with the avoiding of the need to shut down productive sectors. With my background in the Sustainable Business Network and Councillor Chung, I don't often speak about the things that I've done before, but it revealed a strong belief and will among the business community that we can reduce emissions in a way that delivers long-term prosperity. And there is a strong drive from the business communities working towards that. Also, the book that I'm reading at the moment, Not the End of the World by Hannah Ritchie, she's got a data analysis here on we can possibly get some distance on the targets that we're setting around the 2-degree pathway, not the 1.5 degree pathway, if governments stick to their policies. And that is key, and that is what this government is not doing. So it is, yeah, so good to see our submission on that. And also, just back to our own policies, I am hearing what our team are saying. I also think we have got our balance slightly out, and that our own investment is more toward adaptation, where we need to come back to mitigation, and we will be looking at that in the next annual plan. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor O'Neill for your kōrero. It's great.
Councillor Brown.
I'll be voting against this proposal because I actually feel this is a poor submission, and I'd like to explain to you why. I'm a very, very big believer in the ETS and price signals, and frankly, the government has let us down, and it's not just this government, the last government has also let us down with its management of the ETS, which is not sending reliable, useful price signals. And it means that all decisions around investment, whether they're ones made by Wellington Airport or this council or Joe Bloggs as to whether he buys a gas guzzler or an electric car, is that you can't use price signals for carbon to actually inform your decision, because at the moment the price of carbon is about, you may not even know this because most of you probably don't follow it as closely as I do, but it's about $54. It was down 50 cents from yesterday. That is not a price signal that is in any way validating our investment decisions. In our own analysis where we do use price for carbon in the future, we use Climate Change Commission analysis, which indicates that the price should be somewhere north of $100 a tonne. So I feel that we've been let down by this government because of its inadequate management of the ETS, and it's causing us a real problem. And it means that we end up with kind of very emotionally driven debate around what we should be doing in this space. I mean, I think most people around this room are quite pleased that the council is investing in carbon reduction initiatives like the sludge minimisation facility, et cetera, and it's a huge amount of ratepayers' money that we're investing, but we're doing it without a critical variable, which is the price of carbon, and this government is not doing anything to help that. And I just feel that our submission, by being kind of waffly and all over the place and addressing all sorts of things, isn't focusing on this critical issue, which is that the government has let us down by its inadequate behaviour towards the ETS, and the fact that it's still a shambles, it has no credibility. I'd really note that it's not covered by the media, and the reason it's not covered by the media is that it has no sort of credibility, basically. And so I don't disagree with the submission, but unfortunately I completely disagree with its prioritisation, because I feel that that's where we should have actually focused our interest and made that point, and instead of that we've sort of got bogged down on a whole bunch of other ones. So you know, I'm sure this submission is well-meaning, but I think it'll be ineffective because it doesn't address the critical issue, which is the failure of the government to actually manage the ETS and create a credible pricing signal for carbon.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much, Terry. That was a brilliant emotive speech, and I thank you and well done on that. Sarah, you talk about we should go out and do our bit. So, you know, what can we actually achieve? You know, if we actually do things ourselves, we're such a small city in such a small country. But I guess I think that I go out and I try and do my bit. You know, every day. And I've mentioned before that when I walk around my own suburb, I see neighbours with bags, rubbish bags full of grass clippings and leaves and branches and things. And what I do is I go and pick them up, I go and see them, and I go and take them back, and I take them back and put them into my compost bin, and I compost them. And so don't put me off my stride. And so I think that I am doing my bit. I go around and I pick up rubbish that blows around. And so I think that we can all go and do our bit. And so what difference does it make? And people have asked me that before. My neighbours have actually asked me that before. Says, what difference does it make if you take away my bag of grass clippings? And I said, well, it makes a little bit of difference, and I think it is the right thing to do, and I think that you shouldn't be putting this into the rubbish bag so that it goes off the tip. And so I see I have learned something from being on council, and so I get comments from so that was Sarah. So Iona, you talk about you talk about there's a high cost. You know, to these things, and that this is what we should be doing. So yes, you're right, Iona, there is a high cost, but the cost is actually to Wellingtonians. You know, haven't you even noticed that it's such a huge problem with the cost of living now? Is haven't you been listening to all these people that are complaining about the rate increases and they can't actually meet them? And so you're actually putting the costs back onto Wellingtonians again, simply to fulfil this ideology that we should actually be doing something. So again, I'm going to vote against submission because I just think that we're not considering all the other issues that we should be. And I'd like to sort of finish with this by saying it is always easy to spend someone else's money, and this is exactly what you're doing. Thank you.
Right of reply, Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Chung, we're not spending any money with this. This is a submission on a proposal from central government. And just to Councillor Brown, the ETS is mentioned 25 times, and I'd like to draw everybody's attention to the fact that we do have a really lovely cover letter there, but then there's a table that specifically goes into a great level of detail and advocates really strongly for a better pricing structure for the ETS. Yep, I think that's all.
All right, we'll go to the vote, and I don't think we'll take anything separately. You can just vote whether you are for or against this submission. Do you want a division? Yes, you can have a division. That has carried. All right. Now it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Because Michael Naylor is going to come and introduce a report. No, Michael. We're going to talk about the Local Government New Zealand remits. This was the late paper. Cool. Over to you, Michael. No pressure.
Thank you, everybody. Long-time listener, first-time presenter. Apologies if I have a coughing fit during this. I had a flu last week and still have a bit of like a flowery marshmallow stuck in my throat. Look, I will take the paper as read. I'm not going to try and flounder around and explain all the remits in detail to you, but happy to take any questions and deal with them as best I can.
Councillor Calvert.
I promised I'd ask him a question. So, of the remits that go up before LG&Z, how many actually come to fruition? They could be passed, but how many actually do something?
I don't have that information to hand. It'd have to be a question for LG&Z.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Pannett.
The driver licensing one causes me huge irritation. I'm just wondering if you had any insight whether the councils supporting this looked at the risk factors around young people driving, a group that's most likely to cause accidents and die in accidents?
I have no insight to that. It would have to be something that would be, I guess, developed through that remit and in the discussions with the government. But yeah, I don't have it.
Thank you.
Councillor Abdirahman.
This is about the community service one. Where is our footprint when it comes to that one? Are we submitting at least in support of that remission? Or I didn't see anywhere in the paper where Wellington City Council involved in that. It's Palmerston North who...
Yeah, so Palmerston North Council is the one who's put that up. And the opportunity for us as Wellington City Council is to support that remit at the AGM. We have not been involved with the development of it. It's been a remit that they've been working on for some time, I believe predating the discussions that were had at, I think, Regs Review Committee around that same issue.
Oh, okay. I thought it's my understanding we will be involving in it, but if...
But it's certainly up to this committee to support it at the LG&Z remit AGM next week. Yep.
Councillor Young.
So I noticed that Christchurch and Auckland have both left Local Government New Zealand. Can you tell me how much we pay them a year?
No, I don't know a diddly squat about how much we pay for the council.
Probably, diddly squat's probably the answer to how much they do for us.
It's possibly not overly relevant to the question of the remits.
Yeah.
Councillor Rogers.
I've got two questions for Officer Naylor. The first one is we delegate the ability to order these in terms of priorities to the Mayor, are they currently presented in the proposed priority order in the paper?
No, these have been presented in the order that the LGNZ remits were. Felt that it would be, there's dozens of different permutations of how you could possibly order them. It felt not a particularly easy thing for this committee to do. Plus, we also don't know which remits are actually going to get passed at the LGNZ committee, so it feels appropriate that the Mayor would have that delegated authority to make the prioritisation. But if councillors have, during the debate, if they have particular views on that, they're welcome to share that, and that can be kind of taken on board. Yeah.
And I had another one, which was particularly around, I guess, the existing signals government is already sending, how, I guess, effective you think LGNZ's advocacy for GST sharing would be.
Yeah, I mean, the GST sharing has been a policy that, kind of a policy taniwha that local governments have been trying to slay for some time in terms of getting some action on that. The government signals so far have been quite pushed back on that. There's been some discussion around potentially GST sharing around new builds and potentially, revenue sharing in relation to kind of city deals or regional deals. But the indications from the government at this stage is it's not something that they are contemplating. Yeah.
Councillor Chung.
What was the last question?
Don't have to ask a question if you don't remember what it was.
No, I actually was at the local government.
Question.
Yep. Okay. Again, it goes back to the effectiveness of how we actually push these remits and the successfulness of actually getting central government to actually consider them. So, do you think that if we had an agreement amongst all the councils in New Zealand to actually push something, do you think that would actually force the central government to actually consider these seriously? But when we have different opinions on different things depending on the size of the city and how it actually affects the different local governments, do you think that it actually shows us off in a worse light, that we can't actually agree on all these different things because they affect us differently?
I don't feel probably in a position to answer that particularly in a particularly informed way. I assume, the principle of LGNZ councils, taking shared positions, collectively advocating is stronger than doing that on their own, is probably, a sensible one. And I think it certainly applies more for those smaller councils who perhaps have less of a voice than larger councils like Wellington do have on their own. Yeah.
All right. Oh, one more.
Okay, so when the local governments actually vote on these things, is there any difference between, say, a very, very large metropolitan area, like Wellington, Auckland, or Christchurch, and South Wairarapa or something? Like, is there any weighting on the how these remits actually affect them?
I believe we have different numbers of delegates according to the size of the council, is my understanding, and so we have 4 delegates. So the Mayor, as the presiding delegate, has 4 votes on each of these remits.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon is going to move this paper.
Oh, I'm not a council veteran compared to some of us, but this is the first time I've been on council that we've ever voted on remits. Pleased that we are doing so that we are all very clear on what the process is and that the Mayor will be able to vote on our behalf at the AGM. I'm really looking forward to the local government conference. Also just thought it's a good...
Yeah, sorry. Could we cut the side conversations a little bit? It's distracting.
Maybe just a good opportunity to say that there are going to be a lot of members from local government in Wellington next week, and that we've all got the opportunity to show some manaakitanga while they are here and represent our city in a great way. So that would be much appreciated. And I was lucky enough, to be at a Zone 4 meeting on Friday where all the councillors there agreed the value that they are receiving from LGNZ was important, and that it is also important to have representation that advocates for local government to the government, which is what LGNZ does. So thank you, and look forward to receiving your support on these votes.
Deputy Mayor Flynn,
take them separately?
Well, I think we will take them separately. Deputy Mayor Flynn, did you have a seconder, or would you like me to second?
I would. Is there a, yeah, Councillor Free.
Councillor Free, beautiful. Councillor Free, would you like to speak now?
Yes, I would. I just need to note, however, that we've always, well, the time I've been on council, we've gone through a similar process to this, including last triennium, where we definitely at least had informal discussions and agreement. So this is the process. This is a good process to be following. So, and yeah, one that we definitely have done before. So I'm going to support all of these. I don't really have any problem with any of them. And I think some of them are, obviously, they're dearer to my heart than others, but I don't actually have a problem with any of them. So I'm very happy to be seconding this paper.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I won't be supporting E, and for the benefit of Officer Naylor in supporting Mayor Whānau and ranking, I propose DCBFGAH.
Can you sing that? Councillor Calvert.
It's worth a watch, but I watched this YouTube video last night with Mayor Brown and the Gore Mayor, the Mayor from Gore, I can't remember his name, it was under Auckland Unfiltered, and it was a very interesting interview, and I thought they both did really well. And it's quite interesting, you know, the very large council and the very small council, one has removed itself from LGNZ, one's still in there. But they both talked about back to basics, about how their focus was back to basics, back to core services, about what their councils and how they can save money and focus on getting things done. And I think we need to encourage local government NZ, which we pay a hefty membership fee, to get back to basics. And fortunately, I think all these remits are just another distraction because they can't do the basics. And because we've seen like GST, that's been on the agenda for years. So I think we need to allow them to do their core function and do it much better than what they've been doing. And clogging it up with all these remits is just another distraction, and they'll spend most of their time doing nice little templates, reporting, and then nothing ever gets done. So I won't be supporting these remits, but I do appreciate coming to a committee to determine which way the council will vote. But personally, my view is we shouldn't clutter their role up any further than what it's already done. Thank you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. Well, I do slightly share Councillor Calvert's scepticism about the effectiveness of these remits. I'm not sure how much benefit we've got from them, but nevertheless, it is a tool that we have. And Councillor Calvert, you're not really a dyed-in-the-wool activist. Sometimes it takes a long time to achieve anything, so I am very strongly...
You don't know.
Are you offended?
No, I want to correct you. It's misrepresentation.
So, so some of these things around the funding, look, we've just got to keep saying it and working towards that because we don't have enough money. I strongly support C and D around the Māori wards. These are just, and it is absolutely appropriate this year that they come up. I'd like to thank the Gisborne Council for their remit on derelict buildings. I think they put a lot of work into their remit, which is good, and I'd particularly appreciate their concern around the loss of heritage, and so I think they've made a good case, and so hopefully that will get somewhere. Just finally, E, I will be voting against this. Yeah, so this is a long-term obsession with some of the rural councils that they believe that that it needs to be easier for young drivers to get a licence. I take an opposite view. I think it should be harder. So as I said in the questions, the 19 to 24-year-old age group for a long time has been is the age group most likely to cause accidents and to die in them. And thankfully at least that changes a bit as people age. This is a big responsibility to drive a machine that can and does cause death and serious injury. And I think the remit paper for E did not take a balanced view on this issue. I also think that we need to be in the modern world. As a parent, I will not be paying for my children to take driving lessons. They will have to get a job and pay for it themselves if they wish, because the modern world does not require many, many more drivers. We should be relying on a certain group and electric vehicles, obviously. But, this is knowledge and education is the critical thing, not a piece of paper which allows you to drive a lethal machine. Kia ora.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. I would like to speak to two of them. One is the community service card. I think this is really important. I really wish this government realize how that can be life-changing. Even though it's a bit disappointing to that extent, we can do it even without getting that card. And we can make it a bit easy for our community if there is a political will and there is still a way around. And the second one is driving license. I think I didn't grow up in a rural area in New Zealand, but the reason why some people might want their young to drive is maybe school is far away, they might be giving a hand for the family. So some people say driving for young people is not safe. Some people say young people are not really ready to vote. I think young people are ready to do all those things and capable to support their family, and they are capable to lead, they are capable to vote, and I'm supporting all. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great. Looking at these remits, again, sort of along with what's been discussed previously, I'm not convinced about the effectiveness of doing that, of putting the remits in, and I do feel that there are probably better ways of actually getting the message through to government about the things that we would actually like. But looking at these different remits, I see some that I think have got merit in them, but there are also some that I think need further discussion rather than making us making an arbitrary decision on this is what they should do. So with your patience, I'll just run through these. A and B, I actually support these two remits here because I think that there's nothing better than getting good information in time, and so that, because of course information always helps us to make decisions and to make better decisions. So certainly support A. B, I think that yes, we should always try and help those people who actually need the extra help, and I think that this is a case where we do need to. The people with community services cards, they do actually need a little bit of extra help, and I think that anything we can do to actually do that is a good thing. C and D, I think that I will oppose C and D because I think that we are in a democratic system, and I do believe that we should be trying to make sure that everyone is treated exactly the same, and so we shouldn't differentiate between different groups. E, I'm not sure about because I'm not sure. I don't have enough information to know what the waiting list for getting a driver's license is, but I actually have noticed that many of the young people that I know aren't interested in getting a driver's license anymore because they can't see themselves driving a car or with the new technology like Ubers and whatever's. They and also with the help from my colleague Iona, who's educated me on some of these driver share systems, they don't see the need to actually drive anymore. So I think that. So I'm not sure of the relevance of that. So I'd like to look at further information on this. F and G, I think that we should actually discuss these situations with these building owners, and generally I agree that yes, none of us like to see sort of derelict buildings, and I think of a time when we discussed the Amora Hotel quite extensively as being one of the main ones in Wellington that we would actually like to see something done on. And I recall the owner of the Amora, the then owner, E.L. Araroni, coming in and speaking to that, and so he explained to us what he's actually doing to actually try and open that building again or to do something with that building. And so I think for us to be
That's 3 minutes, Councillor. It'd be good if you could wrap it up.
Yep, okay, and say that this is what we want you to do. We need to understand exactly what the building owners' actions have been and what they're actually trying to achieve, and are they actually just leaving them empty because they're land banking? Okay, so I think we're nearly at the bottom of the list here. I agree that,
Really, Councillor, everybody else has been able to do it within 3 minutes easily, so just wrap it up right now, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
because I'm treating you all as simpletons that I need to actually explain things. And so...
Oh, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Young.
Well, I just, this is going to be very much to the point. I think this Local Government New Zealand is a completely useless organisation and a complete waste of money. So in the interest of not going through item by item, unlike one of my colleagues, I'm just going to be voting against the whole thing.
Deputy Mayor Foon, right of reply.
I do hope the Mayor doesn't want to itemise her perspective on each of these at the AGM. But anyway, here we go. Councillor Rogers would like to reassure Councillor Calvert that his opposition to E is for the same reason that she is opposing all of them. So the driver's licence one. Yeah. But however, Councillor Rogers, I would like to give an explanation on E, and the reason why it is there is because the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs is working really hard to make sure that councils can employ rangatahi or young people in their communities. So while it may be a mortal sin to have a licence, I actually think there could be some benefits there. And I do just want to say that the funding of local government issues, Māori ward is a representation which has led to the poll that we're about to have to go through. Derelict buildings, community service cards for the well-being of our community are not distractions, but they are core business and issues for councils. Kia ora.
All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to vote on all of these separately, but we're going to do, and if you don't come back, Councillor Young, you won't get to express your disapproval. We're going to take 1 and 2 together and then do all the letters. And yeah, I felt very talked about as a young person who doesn't have a driver's licence. Okay, 1 and 2 separately? Okay, 1. That ruined my joke.
Can I just say my 12-year-old granddaughter is looking forward to learning to drive? I've offered her my Mini.
Some people...
Okay, most of us have received the information. We now go to 2. Councillor Chung? That's carried. We now move on to the letters. A. Yes. A. The other 2 things were receiving the information and agreeing the following remits. Right, all good, don't be sorry. Let's stop having a debate during the voting. B. This is the community services card one. Councillor Wineta? That is carried. C. This is treating Māori wards the same as other wards. That is carried. D, this is about entrenching Māori wards and constituencies. Councillor O'Neill. That is carried. E, this is the driver's licence. This is about me getting a driver's licence. That is carried. Is it? Yes. 10-7. All right. F, this is about derelict buildings. Free. That is carried. G, this is about funding, equitable and appropriate funding model. That is carried. H, this is about GST. It's like you all had a lot of sugar or something. Who are these people who are laughing and joking? Speak for yourself, councillor. That is carried. And 3, that's the Mayor undertaking the prioritisation. We've already had. I think it's the normal function of the Mayor in terms of these processes, is my understanding. Councillor Abdurrahman, Councillor Panovich, pay attention. Me. That is carried. Okay, we're nearly there, team. Item 2.3, decision register updates and upcoming reports. Siobhan Proctor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleased to present this report, which shows the upcoming programme for the next 2 meetings, as well as the decisions register. Happy to take it.
Councillor Calvert.
So I see that the basement strengthening is on the next meeting, and just wondering why it's on this committee as opposed to the Environment and Infrastructure Committee. Is this about more money?
Through you, Chair. This is for the options, so making a decision on the option to strengthen the basement. So that it's within the money that was allocated within the LTP for that piece, the bridge and Capital E. So this is the basement piece coming back with options of what we do within the budget allocated.
So the question was about why this committee, is it a timing issue?
No, I think it's because the original funding was determined by the LTP committee. And so we're coming back to report against that original funding decision.
But the LTP does the funding for everything, so that would mean everything would come back to this committee then. That's all. Doesn't seem to fit
I think we'll look into why it's coming to that committee and come back, but that is the committee that has been allocated. It's the same group of people.
And my other question is, and I'm just trying to prevent the issue that we had at the council meeting where we adopted the LTP committee's recommendation for the long-term plan, but the annual report is coming to this committee, even though it's already gone to audit and risk. So just if the committee agrees to adopt, to make a recommendation to Council to adopt the annual report, will Council have the ability to accept or refuse that recommendation?
I think because Andrea Reeves isn't here, that is a question we will need to take offline. So,
yeah, I think it would be useful. Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
So it's a bit related to this and following up from Jane's email yesterday from Democracy Service. So if we want to revoke the delegation to vote it under, I'm talking about the annual plan.
I think there is not going to be anybody here who's going to be able to answer the question, as there just wasn't for the last one, as Andrea Reeves isn't here and Jennifer Parker is not here. So I think that you would be better to send that question in an email.
Okay, Madam Chair, but in the future it would be good to have officers who can answer questions.
Well, the officer is on bereavement leave, Councillor.
Oh, yeah, okay, fair. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? All right, I will move this paper. Councillor Panovich will second it. Is there any debate? Councillor Calvert.
Yes, look, it's a bit like the last paper where we were voting on stuff that probably won't make any difference or we can't change anything, but I'm seeing this annual report coming to this committee. It's already gone to the Audit and Risk Committee, then it comes to this committee, then it goes to Council, and to me this is very overly bureaucratic. So it's gone to a specialist committee, then it should come to Council, not to this committee. I think we're just inserting an extra step in the process that we don't need to have. And as far as, and I appreciate the officers aren't here to answer questions, so I will be voting against receiving the information since we haven't got all the information we need. Thank you.
Councillors, I will request in an email that advice be sent to us about this process, so to ensure that the questions that have been asked here today, and you can follow up with any additional questions you have about that, Councillor Abdurrahman. Not trying to not get the questions answered, it's just there are not the people here to answer them. All right, is there any further debate? We will put that motion.
I'll call for a division.
Councillor Brown. That is carried. All right, I will now close the meeting with a karakia. Unuhia, 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 ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatū, koe ara e rongo, whakairia a ki kirunga, kia wātia, aira kua wātia. Thanks, team.